Good morning. Welcome to the Vapor Public versus Private Cloud webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We're joined today by Tim Mercer, CEO of Vapor, and Matt Edgley, Commercial Director at Telidata, and Gavin Young, Client Manager at NTT. If you have any questions today, please submit them in the questions box, and as the webinar gets to an end, we'll answer them. So Tim, I'll hand over to you to introduce our guests.
Thanks, Emma. Good morning, everyone. Obviously, we've got two handsome chaps with us this morning. And so quick intros, and then I'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to do. Gav, can I start with you because you're top left for me? Give us a quick intro on you and how we know you and what you do, and then we'll knock on to Matt.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim. So Gavin Young, I'm a client manager at NTT Limited. We are a global managed service provider. We employ in excess of 40,000 employees across 57 countries, working with enterprise organizations to help them get the most out of technology, really, and drive their business outcomes. So we are very big in the public cloud space, as you can imagine, a huge growth area for us. Thank you for inviting me today.
Oh, good to see you, mate. I thought you might be in the hospital with see the little one's nearly due.
It could be any minute, so if I have to dash off, yeah.
We'll cut it short for you if it is. Matt,
yeah, thanks, mate.
Intro, mate, please.
Yeah, Matt Edgley, I'm the Commercial Director for Telidata UK Limited. We own and operate a Tier 3 carrier neutral data centre in Manchester. So we do a range of co-location and physical hosting services from the data centres, but we also provide a range of VMware-based private and public cloud solutions. So probably a little bit other end of the spectrum to NTT, in that we're still very Manchester-based for data centre and colo. Spreading out wider within the UK for private and public cloud solutions as well. So yeah, our Manchester HQ is a hub of everything we do, so it's a highly resilient and secure facility. And then from within that, we deliver all the other hosted solutions that we provide as well.
Super stuff. Well, we go back a long way, a pair of us, don't we? I thought three of us should have said, Matt, obviously we've got stuff in the data centre with you, and we've known each other for quite some years. Too many to remember. You know, we've got lots of grey hair now. And Gav, me and you worked together. You worked here at Vapor for us for many a year, and obviously gone on to, I won't say bigger and better things. I've just said different things. We're gonna keep it a really sort of high level today. We're not going to get into the detail too much. What I want to just go over, as exactly what it says, public and private. What's the difference? What's some fit for one, some fit for the other? So I'm just going to ask us a bunch of questions, and I'm going to throw it to the pair of you and have a quick conversation around it. And then really, you know, where you've got an example of some of the services, just share it with us. Just share those, you know, we've got a customer who wants to do X, Y, and Z, they had a problem with this, looked at that sort of stuff would be fantastic. We'll do about 25 minutes or so of that, and then we'll take some questions if there are any at the end. So, all right, I'll hit it on the nail on the head. I'll come with Gav first. For the layman out there, Gav, difference between public and private. Nice and sweet, short and sweet.
So public cloud essentially is a multi-tenanted platform where you get the advantages or the benefits of a shared resource. So the underlying hardware, server, storage, networking is shared across multiple tenants, and that is held, and that maintenance or that responsibility for that underlying hardware is by that public cloud provider. So you're almost losing the requirement for you to manage and maintain that underlying infrastructure. Private cloud is the complete opposite of that.
Okay, Matt, do we talk about why cloud?
Well, the why is very, very different from private and public, I'd say, first of all. Primarily flexibility, I think that's the main thing, and public cloud certainly gives businesses that traditionally didn't have the maybe the expertise or the capital investment to be able to put into things like co-location or server clusters or whatever it might have been back in the day. I think public cloud has given pretty much any business that has a server the ability to utilize the cloud and then explore the benefits that gives them. Certainly with public cloud, the capacity side of it is down to the provider. So the end user doesn't even need to worry about future-proofing from a capacity point of view. It's all there and provided by the provider themselves. Private cloud, I think you've got to be a lot further on in your journey, maybe. So although it uses the same kind of overall virtualization technology, it's a lot more physical and probably closer to almost a managed co-location environment to some degree. So both very, very different. But yeah, flexibility, on-demand resources, certainly from public cloud. Private clouds, you kind of need to know what you need from the get-go, really, because you're building out that dedicated hardware environment for yourselves. Yeah, very different models, so there's very different answers for both solutions, really.
Yeah, I think when we look at that, when we're doing it with our customers, we look at that around. You both spoke about it. Cost, capex. You know, depending if you're private, you've got to build your own. But actually, if you're going to go to a private environment, you know, someone's already invested that money in that infrastructure. So there's no capex in essence for the client to build that. The scalability is essential. You know, does it scale with you? Performance, where is it? And the speed, really, of where that sits and what that feels and looks like. You know, as an example, we were talking to someone the other week around a designer, and basically saying, you know, it's really difficult when we've got stuff up in Azure and we really want to, we're pulling these files down and these drawings down, and it's like, well, I understand that because the files are absolutely enormous, and you try to pull them down your internet service. You know, it's not that the platform's poor, it's that your actual pipe's not big enough to pull that design back down. And I think we sometimes miss that scalability side of it as we're going. Gav, talk to me about hybrid cloud. You know, what the feeling is around that. I know lots of people know that, but you know, people who don't, what is that? You know, a quick minute on that. What does that mean?
So yeah, so hybrid cloud is really where we see the future of enterprise businesses, really. So hybrid cloud is where you get to take advantage of the best of both. So you get private cloud infrastructure for your legacy applications or more complex applications that need their own specific resource. Maybe they need certain data sovereignty, compliance. You need to have the control over those applications. And then you get to take advantage of public cloud for that elasticity, that scale, that operational efficiencies that we talked about. So hybrid cloud really is that combination of looking at your applications and assessing what workloads sit in which cloud best, and making sure that you could get the advantages of both. So we see that really with most of our clients now, is that, you know, they have their data centers, they have their private cloud infrastructures, and they will, you know, do a review and assessment on their applications, and essentially, you know, which applications sit better in public cloud, because some applications automatically will sit better in public cloud. Some applications we can move to a software as a service type model, a Salesforce, an Office 365, etc. And some applications will always live better or be more expensive if they were to move to public cloud. So therefore, they're you know, operationally better to sit on a private infrastructure. And so hybrid cloud is really making sure that you can review across all of your workloads and put them in the right place.
Okay, good. So what you're saying there, in essence, is lots of customers then starting to look at that model where they're taking, as Matt rightly said, a secure environment in Teledata or somewhere like that, and an Azure, an AWS environment, whatever that may be, and basically linking those two together to cause and make a hybrid model around that. I presume that comes, Matt, I'll come on to you second about the security, so just having a little think about that element around it. But I suppose that then comes together, having a partner that can understand both aspects and both elements of that, rather than just saying, I've got a better server for you, you can come and get it, or you can just go get it from Azure. So you need to understand and have that technical ability to be able to deliver that hybrid solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's IT just isn't a standalone function anymore. It's a complete business transformation, and so the move to the cloud really needs a view across your whole infrastructure. So, understanding your workloads, your applications, where they're best to for performance, where they're best to sit, how they're best accessed. What we've seen with COVID is really that acceleration of home working, remote working, and then how do we connect into those applications? Traditionally, obviously, most things have lived in a data center or on premise. We're moving away from that now to the cloud. So the network connectivity, as you touched on or alluded to earlier, has changed, and so that needs to be taken into consideration as well. So it really needs that expertise, whether that's internally within an organisation that has that, or through a reseller or a partner that can come in and look at that and really do that assessment across your business, across your workloads and your applications, and then provide the necessary consultancy and roadmap really to that cloud transformation, so that you get the benefit from it as a business.
And Matt, I'll come to you on this, because I think this is where we benefit working with you a lot, where we've got the ability, and you've got the ability of being to deliver, and we'll talk about security in a second, but we'll touch on the networking bit there, of bringing them network carriers to your data center so you can run that private environment, but then also having the ability then doing express routes out to the cloud providers. So you can actually manage that whole infrastructure in essence, can't you, from a networking, private and hybrid cloud environment. I know a lot sometimes the Azures of this world and sometimes forget about that networking capability in the middle, and I think it's really, really prevalent for us to have an understanding. Just give us an overview on that.
Yeah, I mean, we as a data center owner, I think this applies to a number of things. Actually, one thing that always kind of strikes me is cloud buyers seem to ask a lot less questions about the nuts and bolts of a data center and what's available from things like connectivity, as well as some of the resilience pieces, than maybe people that are physically picking up a piece of kit and putting it into a data center. And people need to ask more questions about exactly that sort of thing, because you need to be thinking in the future. You might just be going, a fairly small private cloud, not particularly complex network architecture, but as that grows, like you say, you need to know there's providers on site that can provide that private connectivity into Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or whatever it might be. So we try and educate our cloud buyers to be asking those questions of the providers that they're going to. How much control have they got over those networks? What's the availability like from the different network providers at the sites that they're going into? Or do they even know where the sites are that they're going into? And quite often, I think the answer is no. They just take it for granted that a data center is a data center, but you still need to know exactly what is available from a physical point of view within that data center, because it's got to connect to something, and normally more than one thing. So I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's virtual, people feel less less inclined to ask those physical questions a lot of the time, particularly with public cloud. But private cloud, yeah, you see more questions being asked. But when I look at co-location and people taking rack space and physically piping networks themselves with bits of copper and fiber into that rack, there tends to be a lot more questions around it. But it's just as important in the private and even public cloud arena. Yeah,
Gav, you touched on something there around, it's obviously very, very prevalent at the minute, home working. There seems to me, and we've had it here, Matt, we'll come back to in a second around this, about the acceleration of cloud, whether it be private or public. Put that to one side for the minute. But there's definitely an acceleration of companies thinking, I'll try not to swear here, I keep getting told off for swearing. I'm thinking everyone's at home, and I'm going to be generalised here, so it's not everyone's the same. And so someone's listening and thinking, oh, that's rubbish. I'm just going to be general around it, which is people are at home, and normally those servers have been on site, as an example. An IT person, IT team have been managing multiple racks, multiple servers, in different environments. And then all of a sudden, everybody's gone home. And all of a sudden, the challenges are totally different to what they were previously. You know, the network becomes more and more prevalent. I get that. But actually, the redundancy, the resiliency, the speed, and everything else that we talked about, that the scalability, the performance becomes absolutely paramount because everyone's at home. Yeah, they've got their own broadband challenges, get that. But actually, that's become more and more prevalent of businesses saying we need to move it. Gav, do you see that? Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm sure we're all seeing, you know, a huge explosion in the adoption of collaboration and video and Microsoft Teams meetings and Cisco WebEx and whatever it may be. Now, you know, traditionally, for you to work from home and to secure that end user, they would have a VPN or some form of tunnel into the corporate office and then across the corporate network into the data center. And then at the moment, if they're wanting to access Microsoft Office 365, or as an example, they're coming out of the data center into the internet, do you know what I mean? And that's traversing then all the way back down. So we've got this problem now where the end user experience can be terrible because they're not going straight out into that software application. They're going across the network, across the data center and out. And so the whole, architecture design has changed, and that's really accelerated our customers to look at how do they re-architecture that network, that cloud, those applications. How do they get that end user experience more consistent and secure? And I think that has really, driven a huge amount of cloud adoption.
Matt, same question really. You're probably quite similar to us in some ways. We're getting a lot more opportunities for that hosting in our environment, actually in your environment. So we're buying stuff off you as an example, but hosting it there. Do you see the same?
Absolutely. I mean, data centers have become, during this pandemic, really critical national infrastructure, and that's how they need to be seen now. We still staff the data centers, and we have done since the very beginning with critical key worker support staff. So from a customer point of view, there is always somebody here that can attend to any physical events that might happen to the kit. We're still checking all the infrastructure. You can have that confidence that even while your whole workforce could be at home, the IT equipment that they're having to connect into every single day to still deliver the work that needs to be done while they're in that business continuity situation, that core kit or platform is being looked after. So we have seen an uptick in inquiries and adoption, and there is this thing about has it accelerated cloud adoption during the pandemic? But I think people have been able to refocus their time, and I think there's a lot of projects that maybe were put on the back burner a little bit before people were home-based. People are refocusing or being able to refocus how they are spending their working day and their time, and maybe some of these projects are more able to be focused on at this point and have become a lot more prevalent. But yeah, we've seen huge growth both in physical and private cloud and public cloud adoption, as people are thinking, well, we need to at least start thinking about this and seeing if it's right for our business.
Okay, good. Appreciate that. Gav, you talked earlier, and you just touched on it a little bit about multi-tenancy. Yeah, around there. Give me a quick overview on that, because there's an element of people would think that multi-tenancy would cause vendor lock-in, would cause them some issues later on down the line. Cost, maybe, in essence, around that might fly. How do you see that? Do you think they're valuable concerns or not?
Well, there's a number of things there. So the fact that you're having a shared resource in the cloud across your server storage networking should ultimately lower that cost of ownership and give you a more predictable cost, and also enables you to scale up and scale down. So I don't know, as an example, you furloughed a load of staff during COVID, you can scale your servers, your operation down from an IT perspective. And similarly, if you're Netflix and you've gone through the roof because everyone's at home watching Netflix, you can scale on demand as well. So from a cost perspective, I don't think that's really a concern. From a vendor lock-in, obviously there's there's considerations that need to be taken. We are at NTT, we're one of only 7 globally that hold the top level partnerships with Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and AWS. So we're well positioned to kind of advise, and we see a lot of enterprises that are trying to use a number of public cloud providers to give themselves some public cloud resiliency as well. So there is that, but to a degree, we've always had a bit of vendor locking with Microsoft, haven't we?
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
You know, it's easy enough to move those workloads back down if needed to be. So I think vendor lock-in is, again, kind of a non-starter from a concern, really. There is obviously consideration that needs to be taken in that effect, but I don't think, you know, you've got the 3 main players. So, you know, you're going to go with one of them, really. If you're going to go to a public cloud, you know, everyone else is really you know, fallen away. That there's a few in other areas of the world, but certainly from a European perspective, do you know what I mean? It's going to be one of the big 3. So I think you just need to work with a partner to understand what your you know, what your public cloud provider or preference would be.
I think there's an element of that it felt like that before. Maybe the world's changed a little bit, but it felt like that multi-tenancy piece in there. And Matt, talk to me a little bit about some of the security concerns around that. You've got different customers on the same pieces of equipment, potentially. You know, I think previously there might have been that value that, oh, hang on a second, that can't work for me. There's no way in the world. You know, is that still a concern? Should we have that concern? But is it different now than it was 2 or 3 years ago?
It's about asking the right questions of the provider, I think, because you've got the big 3, like you rightly say, but there's a lot of smaller cloud providers out there that maybe offer a different or a higher level support than maybe you can get from them top 3 for maybe the SME marketplace. And it's about them asking the right questions about their approach to security and the type of platform that the provider operates. But unfortunately, quite early on in their journey, they don't necessarily know the right questions to ask, and that's the difficulty. I mean, I know, for example, our cloud solutions, we utilize VMware and their whole suite of security solutions that are already available. You know, VMs don't even know that other VMs exist on that platform. You've probably got more chance breaking into a data center, breaking into a rack, nicking a hard drive, and then trying to break into it in other ways than to have a concern about it on a virtual platform. But again, I'm not a technical expert, but it's about the majority. You know, the majority of cloud buyers aren't when they first go into it. So make sure you ask the questions about their approach, check their accreditations, and see what they've got to say about the concerns you've got if you've got them.
We've got a couple of questions to finish off with. Gav, I'll come back to you really around, you mentioned it before around applications and services. We tend to don't always appreciate exactly what we're running on a network. I know that when we've got a customer who maybe as an example says, well, my network's running really slow, why is that? It's really difficult sometimes to pinpoint it because there's a whole plethora of services being delivered across it. Applications are becoming very much stringent in how we deliver the services around that. You talked earlier about having some applications in the cloud and some applications on private as an example. Give us a quick overview of that, of what you see and what you mean by that.
Yes, I mean, the first thing we would do in terms of any work with a potential customer in terms of an initial assessment consultancy piece would be to understand, you know, your current workloads, your current applications, and I suppose do a prioritization across those workloads. So, you know, what are the most business critical to you? What are the security considerations around some of those applications? If you've got legacy systems, are they better just to be retired and moved to a new software as a service provided application? You know, if you've got a case management system as a legal practice that you've run for 10 years, there's probably no point migrating that to the cloud because there's probably a better as a service software model from one of those case management sites. So, you know, some applications can be retired and taken as a service platform. Other applications lend themselves to be public cloud ready. So we could look at those sort of low hanging fruit and say, actually, these applications are perfect just to move as they are into a public cloud environment. And other applications, maybe from a control perspective, a performance perspective, some of the reasons we mentioned are better to sit on a private infrastructure or a private cloud. And so it's about doing that initial upfront work to understand your applications, your workloads, and what you should do with all of those different applications. And that's that kind of first piece of work that we would do with any organization.
I think, Matt, you touched on this as well. You both have. It's come across quite strongly. Is make sure you ask the right questions, and if you don't know the right questions to ask, make sure you get the right people to work with to ask you the questions to make sure you're getting the information that you require to build the right platforms that you want moving forward. One thing that we always hear, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I'll throw to Matt for this, is a cost comparison. We always get this as an example, which is if you put stuff in Azure, it's really expensive and you'll really struggle to get it back. As an example, the support's awful because it's Microsoft. You won't get the support that you get from ABC, private cloud provider. True, false, bit of truth, bit of falseness. What's the thought process? First of all, you need to have the right people to support it and deliver it. I understand that. But as a generalization, what do you think? Is that an honest opinion or not?
It depends. It depends who you are and what you've got and the level of expertise you've got. Whether it can become very expensive. You could look at an AWS or Azure environment that's become out of control because you're not using it properly and struggle to understand what every single line item was and really end up with a very expensive, inefficient platform. Equally, you could go to a middle of the road cloud provider with very high levels of support that sell themselves on customer service, and quite rightly so, but in reality you've got a level of internal expertise and resource that really doesn't require you to put a lot of value on that. So again, it comes back to procurement process, I think, and understanding before you make that move into what is important to you and what the differences are between those providers, because it's huge. Cloud isn't cloud. There's marked differences between the levels of support you get, but also the levels of support you need. The same in terms of costs of networks. What's going to happen as your network grows? What's that cost going to be? What's the cost of the individual cloud resources as they grow, or the processing power, or the hard disk space? Unless you spend some time working out what you think or where you think it's going to go and what you can do yourself, I think you run the risk of making that wrong decision, and either one of the two or of any could work out very expensive or very good value for money.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to get. Thanks for answering it like that, because I think that's what I was trying to get across, which is we hear it a lot. You don't want to go there because it's far too expensive. You don't want to go down this route because that won't work for you. And I think what we've heard today, before we do the closing bits, is what I've heard today is make sure you work with the right people and the right partners to make sure you ask the right questions to deliver the right services. Make sure you listen to what the security policies are, what the applications are being driven. But most importantly, make sure you work with someone that you can trust and you can understand and actually wants to work with you and has got the skill set. Maybe they don't have it in-house. Like us as an example, we've got lots of skills, but sometimes, as Gavin knows, we'll go to Gavin, we're working with a big project with Gavin NTT at the minute because we don't have the skill set in-house. Matt, same with you. We'll come to you and buy services and stuff out of the data center that we can't procure because it makes more sense. And I think that's really, I really want to try and get that across. That it's about the team being, because you're not going to have all the skills, and not unless you're an NTT and you've got 40,000 employees. It's pretty rare that you're going to have all the skill sets in one house. So you've got to go and start pulling them off the right people. You've got to be able to work with someone. I think that's really, really important. And there isn't one size fits all. I think that's what we get from today. You can have a little bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that. But as long as you bring it together correctly and you understand what you're doing, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I'd just touch on that. I think some of the large misconception is that customers move to a public cloud and that's it. Their hands are clean. It's somebody else's problem, and it's not. Microsoft Azure are going to look after the underlying hardware, and that is it. You still got to look after the applications. You still got to back the data up. It's still yours to manage that environment, unless you outsource that to a provider. But essentially, it's still your responsibility. So when it comes to that, will you get that level of support? Well, Microsoft are just looking after this level here in terms of keeping the platforms running. It's still your requirement to manage it and be responsible for the data. And in terms of the cost, again, it comes down to right sizing those environments and making sure that you're optimizing it. Because we do see a lot of customers where they call us up and their cost has spiraled out of control because suddenly now people are just spinning up virtual machines, the cost getting out of control. Again, it comes down to that management of it.
I agree. A good point, Gav. No, I appreciate that. So, last bit from you. I appreciate both of your time coming on. I want to give yourself a couple of minutes each of you to plug both sides of the business. NTT and Matt from your side from Teledata. So, if anyone's listening, give yourselves and the business a plug around that, and let's get that out there. And Gav, the same with you. I appreciate everyone coming on and listening and spending the time. So let's make sure that we can share that knowledge. So over to you, Matt. Why should we come and work with you guys at Teledata? Why should customers come to you guys?
Customers, I think the customers that generally value being with us are people who want to get to know the people that they work with. We provide anything from physical rack space and power that for people to move their own kit in, configure their own kit and make it work exactly how they want to make it work, through to public cloud where we're just allocating individual virtual servers, but it's all operated by the same core team that people will get to know and get to value day in, day out. And we focus a huge amount on resilience from being a data center operator at the core. So we've got levels of security and physical resilience that you won't find anywhere else, or in very few places in the UK. But then we've taken that through to the cloud platform and instilled the same ethos into the resilience level. So we span multiple sites, and we've got automatic failover between the two so that people don't have to design an active solution. It's all there for you already. We've already done it. I think we just try to be good people to work with. We don't fit every size requirement and every type of requirement, but we're quite happy to tell you that if that's the case. And I think we just try to be honest, trustworthy and upfront. And I think people like doing business with us.
No, I agree with that, mate. So I think we've worked together at my previous firm. Only 10 years, I think we've been together, worked together over the years. So we've had instances in that data center for 10 years. So I wholeheartedly instill that. Gav, with you, why NTT? Obviously, because you're there.
Obviously, because of me, you get to deal with me. Do you know what I mean? No, so I mean, from our side, we are, a huge, global ICT player. So we've got huge, deep expertise, deep vendor relationships, and purchasing power, as you would imagine. But really, for us, it's that commercial and enterprise space is where we're really strong, where customers have multinational requirements because we've got presence in 100 odd countries. We've got data centers across the world. We've got network infrastructure around the world. So that's really where we come into our own from a UK perspective. We're headquartered out of the UK, so headquartered out of London, although we're a global organisation. And actually, our UK footprint is relatively small. So I think going back to something Matt touched on there is that we have a global, huge organisation and technical expertise behind us and vendor relationships. But importantly, in the UK, we are relatively small, and therefore you get that very much personal experience and very much engagement at a senior level within the business. So yeah, that's it really. We want to work with organizations like yourselves, both of you, and customers where I suppose our strapline is really technology for good. So how can we use technology to better cities, companies, businesses, the world in general. How can we use technology for good and leverage those vendors?
Super. Gentlemen, I appreciate both of your time this morning. I'm pretty much back on time, half an hour. We might have some questions, so I'll see if Emma's got some questions for us, but we've covered quite a lot there today, so we might not have any, don't know. Emma?
No questions, you have covered it all. So thank you very much. So thank you, Tim from Vapor, Matt from Telidata, Gavin from NTT. We hope to see you at another of our events in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.